in the town's quiet memorial garden, it is hard to imagine the carnage. But George Stobbs, who was one of the first policemen at the scene, remembers it vividly.
Houses were just slowly burning, and more houses were catching fire. The windows were popping, the doors were burning. Everything was it was like hell. I remember also seeing a wrought iron gate, and in the distance, and I could see it was actually dripping like molten butter. It's dripping away.
All 259 people on board the flight, most of them Americans on their way home for Christmas, were killed, as were 11 residents of the town. The debris from the wreckage scattered over a vast area. We're 20 miles from the actual crash site at Lockerbie here, but this is where the nose cone landed. And between here and the tip of the horizon, they found 120 bodies.
Wow.
Search teams combed 845 square miles for clues as to what brought the plane down. A trail which led Scotland's criminal justice system to a Libyan businessman and suspected intelligence officer, Abdul Basit Ali al-Megrahi.
The houses that were here were destroyed.
John Gale was never entirely convinced Megrahi was the man who destroyed his neighbour's home, but he says the politics behind the bombing was always only a distant reality.
Right, he was a fall guy, that's all.
The politics of the Middle East were and still are immensely complicated. The ordinary citizen has no means of judging these things.
Policeman George Stobbs says most Lockerbie residents never really cared who was behind it.
They're not interested in the politics of the thing, and they just want to go on with their life. And I think Lockerbie has got to that stage now.
270 people from 21 nations met their deaths in these beautiful hills and in the backyard of Lockerbie.
It's beautiful.
20 years later, homes are rebuilt. The events of that terrible night are buried here, but not forgotten.
So let every dying prisoner out of jail. Everybody. Start in Great Britain. You guys started in Scotland. Spread it. Let everybody else in Scotland is dying out. Then go to England, Wales, Ireland, North and spread it across the world. And maybe America will take the lead and start letting all the dying inmates out of American jails spend time with their families.
Is that a quote from you?
That's an understatement. This is absolutely appalling. Appalling. You want to feel sorry for anyone?
Here's an American view.
Feel sorry for my
between American and British. To hear that man a minute ago.
Falling a mile through the air and landing in a sheet metal. This is 270 people dead. This is a convicted mass murderer and terrorist. I have no doubt about his guilt. I don't know whether he's going to live or not live. We've been told he's been dying. I've heard that for a very long time. But he will be a hero in Libya. They couldn't even wait a day to release him. Let me tell you what this is really about. This is about the appeasement of Muammar Gaddafi for oil. Big oil interests are in this. Lots of lobbyists.
They always
Why do you say that? Explain that.
I will explain it very easily. British Petroleum makes a deal with Gaddafi, and then Tony Blair came out with another alternative way of getting
government wouldn't give the Scottish guy any advice.
Prisoner release exchange when actually there are no British prisoners in Libya. The fact is that from the time George Bush went out on television and didn't even mention Lockerbie and said that we've had our differences with the Libyan leader, the handwriting was on the wall. We have our congressman visiting there. There are business deals all of the time. Shell Oil. It's absolutely about appeasing Muammar Gaddafi. You don't think Megrahi did this solely on his own. I believe that Gaddafi told it or ordered him whatever way they did that. Obviously, nothing happens in Libya without Gaddafi being on top of it.
Ms. Cohen, I hate to interrupt you, but there are some people who don't really see that connection. They're saying his release, whatever happened in the trial and during that, whatever came out, is separate from why he's being released.
Well, I
think
think
part of their government and part of their system.
Well, I think it's appalling, and the U.S. could have used a lot more pressure on them. You are talking about a mass murderer. I am telling you, this is the best argument for capital punishment you'll ever find. You mean you commit mass murder, an act of terror, you kill all of those innocent young people, a family of 3 little girls, and you are released for compassion?
Did you make your appeal to the Scottish government or to the U.S. government?
Of course I did. I've also tried to get Obama's attention. He shook hands with with Gaddafi. He has not shaken my hand. We tried to get condolences on the 21st from him. We've tried to have meetings.
That is really a bone of contention, the handshaking with Muammar Gaddafi.
I think that was appalling. The man is the worst, one of the worst human rights records in the world, committed acts of terror. It bothered me terribly, and at least he could have issued some sort of statement acknowledging the KM 103 situation and acknowledging his human rights abuses. Have we reached the point where we are now ready to tolerate and accept Muammar Gaddafi, to appease someone like that? Are we so devastatingly weak now? Have we lost all our moral fiber that you can say that Megrahi can be released from prison for compassionate release? Where was his compassion for my daughter? Where was his compassion for all those people?
Ms. Cohen, I have to ask you.
Where's the compassion for all the other terminal ill people in jail being let out before they die? They should all be let out.
This release.
They are the British, a few British families. There's not a single American family I know of who feels that way.
Right, exactly. That's why we're British and you're American.
With innocence or guilt. It has to do with upholding a legal system. You have trials. People are found guilty. He had an appeal. Understand, he was in the middle of an appeal which he dropped. So there are avenues for that kind of thing. I think he was guilty, and I think it's appalling. But whether someone thinks he's innocent, that makes it okay. What does it have to do with this? Nothing at all. We have no laws. Our laws don't count. Our legal system is worth nothing. We may as well not bother with trials. I mean, that is amazing. The man should have remained in prison, and I do not believe any of those ideas about his lack of his not being guilty. As I told you, there was a massive propaganda campaign launched by the Libyans, and you often found things in the British press and the European press you would never have found here, really remarkably gullible things. You had lobbyists, you had Gaddafi buying people who were there, and in Britain, and you have had some pretty awful stuff. So,
during the time of all of this, there was some wrangling about exactly where Mr. Megrahi would serve out his prison time, and some folks had thought about this process, that maybe if he was in Scotland, because of this compassion and because of how their laws are made, there was some concern that this sort of thing could happen. So at the time, some folks wanted him to be housed somewhere else, maybe because it was an international crime, maybe in the United States, maybe in Britain.
Oh, he'd never be out if he was here.
That he would be housed under different laws and eventually stay in jail or in prison.
Well, I wanted him to be tried here. I wanted him to be imprisoned here. I worked for it. But we couldn't do it. We were promised at a family meeting where there were representatives of the Justice Department in Britain, and in Scotland, and in the United States, that this could never happen. Many families believe that. I didn't. I don't have that kind of faith in government. This is absolutely appalling. They didn't have to release him. They could have refused to release him. This is not your typical crime. And I want you to know who's very happy in the world today besides Muammar Gaddafi. And that's Osama bin Laden. Because he can say to himself, if that can happen, and I'm ever in a position where I've got oil, then they will deal with me. And that is what Gaddafi knows. And I'm telling you, this sends a dreadful message to terrorists everywhere. You do not do this. You do not release a mass murderer as if he's some guy who had a minor crime. Where does that kind of thing end? And nobody knows.
It should start a mass
Ms. Cohen, hang on for 1 second.
Freedom of all dying people in jail. Every dying person in jail should be set free as of today, August 20th, 2009. Let everybody out. Across the world, and in America, people, and in America. If everyone's dying, let them all out of jail. Let them be home with their family. If someone this big is let out, you know, supposed terrorist or fall guy, whoever he was, if he's let out because he's dying, let every single person in jail that's dying, that's terminally ill, out of jail. Simple, simple, simple. This could start a worldwide revolution of showing compassion for everybody. Maybe it will start fixing the world. People can die in peace. Die in peace with their family.
Government, and to any person convicted would serve his sentence in Scotland. So at the time, again, as I said, there was some wrangling.
Scotland's compassionate. That's
because
reason America.
you wanted them and other people wanted them to be held in Britain.